We are going to turn our attention to what has been happening, if anyone can work out, in the Home Office. Many, many years ago, the former Labour Home Secretary, John Reid, said the Home Office was not fit for purpose. Doesn't see much evidence that it is anymore. Let's talk about what's been going on with the Priti Patel, the Home Secretary. She has been subject to a number of leaks and briefings, claims that she is a bully, claims that she's making unreasonable demands, that she doesn't actually want to obey the law, claims that she has actually made one official so sick that he actually ended up in hospital. She, however, has countered with a call for an inquiry into the leaks. This amid claims that MI5 are not briefing her fully because they are concerned about her being a security risk. So what on earth is going on? Well, let's speak to someone who's a former special advisor to Priti Patel, James Starkie, who joins me in the studio right now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Simple question. Is Priti Patel a bully?
No, she's not. I mean, I've known Priti for a number of years. I've obviously worked with her up until several weeks ago, very recently. I can honestly say she's one of the best people I've ever worked for. So I don't know where those allegations come from, but I've never seen anything that would suggest that she is.
Well, I think we do know where the allegations have come from. They're coming from quite senior civil servants, aren't they? These are senior sources at the Home Office talking to senior, well-respected journalists who clearly know who those sources are, who are claiming that, she is bullying staff, making unreasonable demands, as I say, possibly even unconcerned about legalities when it comes to issues like flights to deport people. What do you make of those claims?
Well, number one, we don't know exactly where they're coming from because, as you said, while the journalists that are reporting them are very well-respected journalists, it's notable that all these claims have come from nameless people. So I kind of highlight that. I think, in terms of any of the specific allegations, I haven't been there for the recent events, obviously, but I think it is a serious matter if it is true that people within the department are speaking to the press under anonymity.
Again, it wouldn't be the first time this has happened. Amber Rudd, former Home Secretary, faced being undermined by her own staff, she's claimed. She, of course, had forced to resign as Home Secretary after a very short time in the job over the Windrush affair because she was given false information, knowingly false information by her immigration staff. She then fell on her sword because she'd lied to the House of Commons. Again, not deliberately, it would transpire. There's now an reported that she apparently has made a formal complaint about senior staff over this.
Yeah, again, I don't know the specific details, but I heard you earlier, Julia, rightly point out that in that scenario, Amber lost her job. She left. And I think there is always going to be...
The senior officials involved still employed in the civil service.
Well, exactly, as you said earlier, I think there is always going to be a point of how accountable are officials, because we know that, and it's quite right that our elected politicians are held to account. People vote them in to do that job, and it is, and we see that. And unfortunately for Amber at the time, she went over figures that my understanding is she was provided by someone else, and you do rely on those civil servants. But you pointed out yourself earlier, those senior officials, I understand, are still in a job.
The whole string of allegations that has come out. One of them is that Priti Patel has presided over an atmosphere of fear at the Home Office, and that a senior immigration official had apparently collapsed after a meeting with her. After dealing with her, and someone else also resigned after her coming to the Home Office because they found her impossible to work with. Other information suggests that actually this man had resigned before she'd even been appointed Home Secretary.
Well, I could look. I don't want to go into personalities for obvious reasons. I'm not sure that's helpful. There are a couple of allegations that I could comment on directly, I think, without contravening any kind of contractual confidentiality issues.
Official Secrets Act, which presumably you signed.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Mark Thompson, who's an absolutely fantastic official, actually.
He was the Director General of UK Visas and Immigration and the Passport Office.
That's correct. Probably one of the best officials, I think, most people would agree, that are in there within the entire civil service. In fact, when I got to the Home Office, I joined Priti within a day of her becoming Home Secretary. We knew that he had already resigned
last July.
Yes, that's correct. And so factually, that's just literally not true.
But the claims in the papers last week was that he had resigned because he didn't want to work with Priti Patel.
That's not true.
It's simply factually
That's
untrue.
factually
He had
inaccurate.
already resigned.
That is correct.
Okay.
And also one other thing, if I may, Julia, point out, speaking to kind of friends and so on around the Home Office, I understand there's also a lot of anger about the briefing around the security issues.
Well, let's talk about this. The MI5, the claims that that MI5 bosses had basically been holding information back from Priti Patel, following reports that officials lacked confidence in her abilities. The Home Secretary has said these media reports are false. MI5 have said today in the paper that those allegations are false and that she's not getting any less of a briefing than any other former Home Secretary.
Well, I think my understanding is it's highly unprecedented for MI5 to speak out in this way.
Some might say, well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, as I said, it's pretty much unprecedented for them to speak out in this way. So I think that in itself, the fact that they have taken steps to, as it appears, again, I don't know, I haven't spoken to anybody in the security services about this, but I've seen the same things you have. The fact that they've taken the steps to speak out and make it clear that, one, that's not true, and that, two, these kinds of briefings are not conducive to the public good and to public security. And the fact that that's happened, and well, certainly no one I spoke to could remember whether it was speaking to anyone in the press or in the Home Office could remember that happening before, I think speaks for itself.
I mean, it would appear, given that some of these allegations are being strenuously denied by credible people, and there's a paper trail proving some of these issues, like the resignation of the senior official, that there is a smear campaign going against Priti Patel. Is this motivated against her personally, do you believe? Is this an ongoing battle? We've seen this, anyone who's seen Yes Prime Minister would have seen these battles between the civil service against elected politicians who come in and want to change things, and no, this is how we've always done it. We have seen an extraordinary battle going on between elected politicians, elected representatives, and the civil service in recent years over Brexit, the supposedly independent, neutral civil service doing the bidding of the democratic elected politicians. That has been questioned in recent years by a lot of people, including myself, over the issue of Brexit. Do you believe that some of this is motivated by Ramonas in the civil service wanting to undermine a leading Brexiteer?
Well, I have to say, I worked principally for Michael Gove at DEFRA during that kind of period. I found pretty much almost all the civil servants that I worked with to be fantastic, to work to the Secretary of State's priorities, diligent, good at their job, very, very smart people. So I think, as with all these situations, whenever we talk about them, it's important to remember that by and large, pretty much most people that do those kinds of jobs are turning up this morning for work, doing a great job, doing the best they can.
They're professional, they know the job.
Totally. And, having been in the department when they've had to deal with floods, for example, before, people will work night and day to try and help the public in those very difficult situations. So I think it's important to remember that. It's also true, I think, and I've experienced this to some extent, and I think we've seen it with other ministers who try to make significant change, that there is sometimes, whatever the issue, I don't necessarily think it's just about Brexit, there is sometimes some resistance to that change.
Well, we saw this with your former boss, Michael Gove, when he was at education, the education blob, the urge to stop it. Is there an issue, though, which we currently have with our civil service, that they are determined to stop a level of change that this government is wanting, and which you could argue has a clear mandate for?
Well, one of the things that, an observation that I would make is I think that for a number of years, we've had a political situation through no fault or direction or involvement of the civil service, which has been somewhat in flux, lack of majority and so on. And I think for the first time for a number of years, we have a prime minister with an absolutely clear stonking, you could say, majority, now has that mandate from the British people to deliver on the election. So, but I think if you look back for the last 3 or 4 years, one of the characteristics of our domestic politics was that there was in some way, I'm not sure you would call it a vacuum, but because of that political flux that was brought up by Brexit and the 2017 election, I think somehow there was some kind of gap there that maybe that maybe was filled by others. Now we are in a different situation. The Prime Minister obviously won that very, very clear mandate. And so I think, it's up to anybody working in government to help him deliver that.
And just finally, briefly if you would, Priti Patel as Home Secretary, Sir Philip Rutnam, who is the Home Office's permanent secretary since April 2017, is it tenable for them to continue working together?
Like I said, I don't want to comment on personalities.
But...
I don't know comments on personality, but
is it possible, in theory, for a Home Secretary to continue working with a permanent secretary who they believe is undermining them?
The truth is, with regards to Sir Philip, is we don't know if this is what we all know what happens in the media when things are presented as something. Perhaps sometimes we speak to people and find out the opposite. So I would personally reserve judgment and not comment on that. But I do think that if you're in a department working for any politician, you need to be working for that politician and delivering on the mandate that they've got.
OK, James Starkie, very much appreciate you joining us here on Talk Radio, former Special Advisor to Priti Patel, the Home Secretary.